What is up everyone, Movie back again with another video. Today is going to be my 2022 movie ranking. I've done one of these last year and I had about 90 odd films in there. This year I've got about 125 films in here. So it's going to be a little bit of a long one, I imagine, but I'm not going to spend too much time on each title because it will just go on forever. So these are just going to be little mini thoughts, really. I don't know if I'll watch this many movies next year because I'm going to mix it up a little bit and catch up on a lot of classics and stuff. But some of these movies were absolutely fantastic and some of them were utter dross, really. And you'll find out which ones are which in just a second. Now, don't forget, I've already done a top 10 movies video of the year. So with the top 10, I'm going to be very, very brief on them. But if you want to see that, I'll leave the link down below. And I didn't do a top 10 worst movies video this year. I don't know how I feel about doing them, but maybe next year I'll do it. But here, you're going to find out my top 10 worst anyway. So without further ado, everyone, let's just get into the worst movie I watched in 2022. And this is the only film on my Letterboxd to get a 1-star rating. And at the bottom is a Fistful of Vengeance. Now, I give this 1 star instead of half a star because some of the fight scenes in this movie were okay, but everything apart from that was just absolute dross. An absolute mess of a movie. The script is terrible. It's about these martial artists fighting drug dealers, but all this ancient fantasy stuff comes into it. I believe it's based on a TV show, which I have no interest in watching whatsoever. Iko Uwais, who was in the Raid films, is so much better than this movie. And there's another thing that drew me to it because I thought, oh, he's in the Raid movies. This must have something about it. But no, he picked the wrong film here. All the characters were terrible. The dialogue is cringy as hell. I've never heard such silly things coming out of people's mouths. It was just... I couldn't wait for the movie to end. It was just absolutely horrific. And definitely the worst movie of the year, but also one of the worst films I've ever seen in my life. I haven't seen this on too many people's worst of lists, so I don't know if many people avoided it. But going by the trailer, I thought it looked okay, so I thought more people would have watched this, but that was a mistake. This movie was terrible, and I never want to see it ever again. So that is a Fistful of Vengeance at the bottom. So this next bunch of movies all received a 1.5 star, which is slightly better than Fistful of Vengeance, but I had a better time with these movies than that one. But these movies are all still bad. And next up, in 124th place, we have Brazen, which was the first film to release this year on Netflix. It's a mystery movie about this killer going round, and he's obsessed with this woman's books, and this woman offers to help the police catch this killer, and they let her. They've got all these detectives on the payroll and stuff, but they go, yeah, we'll let you come in and solve the case for us because we're no good at our job. And I seen the ending coming a mile away. The characters were so boring and just had nothing to them. The story was dull. It was just a nothing movie. Next up, we have A Violet Man, a film I was kind of anticipating. This came out in the at the second month, at the same time as Fistful of Vengeance. And I was anticipating this because Craig Fairbrass is in this movie, and he is the star of the Rise of the Foot Soldier films, and they are so entertaining. I think he's a very underrated actor, actually. And I think he should be higher up in the Hollywood food chain by now. I know he's in movies like Kick-Ass and Cliffhanger, but man, what the hell was this he was in? This is just a story about 2 guys sharing a prison cell in jail and stuff. And I usually like prison movies, but there was just nothing to this. It was just one of the most boring films I've ever seen in my life. Craig Fairbrass was just playing this utterly dull character. And they tried to intertwine something where in the story where he was going to meet his daughter at the end, but he has to choose between this guy in his cell to help or seeing his daughter again and leave that guy sort of, you know, to fend for himself, but he won't survive. And it was a good concept, I suppose, but it just didn't work at all. This movie was an absolute mess, directed horribly, by the way. It just was so sore on the eyes to watch. and I was just bored from start to finish. I couldn't wait for this one to end either. Next up we have Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm a bit of a Turtles fan, not the biggest, but I do enjoy the movies. I used to watch them as a kid. And I thought, oh, a new Turtle movie's on Netflix, yeah, let's give it a go. And I think this is a way to finish the Turtles show that was on Netflix. They ended it with this movie, and it's no wonder that show has ended, because if it's anything to go by with this film, I can see why Netflix put it to one side. The animation was horrible in this film. It was one of the worst animated films I've ever seen. The story was all over the place. It was just not fun at all, and even the turtles in this movie annoyed the shit out of me. The worst Turtles film I have ever seen. Last up for my 1.5-star movies is The Weekend Away. Now this film, like a lot of Netflix films that came this year and streaming movies, just felt so empty. I think this must have been filmed in COVID or something, because there's like 4 characters in the entire film and it's a murder mystery. I think it takes place in Greece, and this woman is waiting around for her friend to come back who's been killed that she doesn't know about yet, but she's just waiting around. And I was kind of just waiting around for the movie to finish. A totally dull film that just done nothing for me. It was kind of like, you know, them Christmas films that come at the end of the year on Netflix and they're quite poorly made, but entertaining. That's what this film felt like, but not entertaining. It was just not executed well at all, not directed well, not produced very well. It was just a nothing movie that will probably be forgotten by everyone, I feel, by the end of 2022. Yeah. And it's 2023 now, but there you go. Next up is a film that I've seen on a few people's worst of the year lists. Now, all these films all received a 2-star from me. So we've had 1 star, 1.5, and now we're on to the 2 stars. And there's quite a chunk here. And that is Choose or Die, another Netflix film that, again, felt very, very empty. They tried to involve video games with horror there, and I was quite excited for this concept. I'm a bit of a video gamer myself. The music was done by The Prodigy, which is a band I've gone to see, and Robert Englund was in there, or was he? Yeah, no, they lied to us. It was just kind of his voice. Again, just a very, very poor movie. It tried to have this big cool twist at the end that didn't work at all. The characters were bland as hell, and the games that they have to play to survive, because they die if they don't pass the level in the game, are just so boring. And there was one involving a rat which made no sense to me whatsoever. I was like, what the hell is going on in this game on this screen? It didn't make sense. My cousin, who I work with every day, actually liked this film, but even he said he had no idea what that was all about. It was just a mess of a film. Another Netflix dud, in my opinion. Next up, we have another very boring movie. I know I'm saying boring a lot, but I think boring films can be worse than bad films, because at least with bad movies, you've got something to talk about. When you're just watching boring movies, you're just slogging through the film, aren't you? Slogging through the runtime, and that's what I felt like with The Cellar. Alicia Cuthbert is an actress I really like. I watched 24 as a kid. It was my favourite TV show ever. Well, more of a teenager. And it still is to this day. And she was a big character in that. So I was excited to see her back in a movie here. But this film was just haunted house movie, basement, what's in the basement? Doors are opening now and on their own, and things are moving by themselves. Never seen that one before. And then they involve the subject of maths. Yes, it's all something to do with numbers and stuff that makes this film scary. I didn't like math in school, but it didn't scare me. Next up is a movie that I just don't really have too much memory of, and that is The Man from Toronto. Kevin Hart is in a few movies this year, wasn't he? But this is definitely his worst team-up that I've seen him in any film. Woody Harrelson is a really good actor, but he just did not have any chemistry whatsoever with Kevin Hart here. It's a kind of buddy cop type deal. I can't even remember if one of them is a cop and one of them isn't. I can't remember. It's just a very, very forgettable film for me, this one. Kevin Hart plays a lot of the same character in his movies, doesn't he? I think he needs to come away from that now, unless he's teaming up with The Rock, because he does really well with him, or Ice Cube. But some of the actors he works with, it just doesn't work, and this was one of them. This film was just such a dud. Woody Harrelson he couldn't bring anything to the film. And when you're being outshone by Kevin Hart, who can't bring anything to the film either, you know you're in the wrong movie. Next up, we have Spiderhead. Now, Joseph Kosinski made a film that is a lot higher on this list. And he also made this, which is near the bottom. This movie was interesting and executed very, very poorly. Chris Hemsworth, who's got like this kind of lab going on, and he can control people's feelings and make people be attracted to each other and stuff. And he seems like a nice guy at first, but then yeah, he becomes the villain, and he's just not a very good villain, which was one of the biggest problems with this film. Chris Hemsworth was totally miscast here. Miles Teller as well, usually a great actor, brought nothing to this movie for me. And this is another one that just felt very, very empty, and it looked like it was filmed during the COVID pandemic. And I get it, you know, you are limited at doing that, but if you're filming in them situations and stuff, but you could just feel it. There was no atmosphere to this film. There was no life. There was no heartbeat. It was just a film that is, again, very, very forgettable and just threw out there by Netflix. It done nothing for me at all. And Chris Hemsworth, I really don't want to see him as a villain again. Next up, we have Bring It On, Cheer or Die. Now, I was always going to watch this film because I used to watch Bring It On as a kid. Well, my sister used to love it, and I kind of watched it a few times when she had it on in the house and stuff, and I was a fan of it, I'm not going to lie. And when they were bringing a horror slasher version out of it, I thought, you know what, I'm going to check this out, and yeah, it's as bad as the movie poster looks. Basically, this cheerleader group go away for the weekend, lock themselves in this big hall, and decide to practice their routine because they want to be the best and win this competition that's coming up. And someone decides to start killing them off one by one. Sounds okay, executed very, very poorly. The reveal of this film, of this killer, was the most laughable reveal I have ever seen in any whodunit slasher movie. I was laughing my ass off, and I just thought the characters could have easily overpowered them at any second. The kills were awful as well. They were like all off screen. It was like it was going for a 12 or PG-13, whatever you want to call it, rating. The main actress was okay. Rest of the characters were a bunch of arseholes. Next up, we have a Stephen King film called Firestarter, which I've done a full review on this channel. I was kind of looking forward to this, especially after watching the original Firestarter, but also an immediate thought in the back of my head were, do they need to remake this? That's kind of a really good movie anyway. And they've done this in every way worse. They've done this as a remake in every worst possible way than the original. If I hadn't seen that original film, I would have struggled to keep up with this story because it doesn't really explain what's going on very well, in my opinion, in the whole plot and what's happening with their daughter and stuff. I felt like if you were a newcomer to this film, you would have to assume what was going on with this girl's powers and stuff, and why her parents have powers and stuff like that. I mean, it's like the original film done all the explaining for me, and then just went their own way with this and felt like they didn't need to explain. Very, very dark movie, very dull. Yeah, just a bad film. And I actually went to cinema to see this, and kind of wish I just watched it at home on streaming now, or not watched it at all. Next up, we have one of the best titled films of the year, and that is Bitch Ass. That's the whole reason I watched this movie, actually. I just love the title and the poster. And this is a Saw type movie, but instead of using traps, he makes them play board games. Deadly games of operation, deadly games of battleships. And get ready for this one. He makes them play deadly games of rock, paper, scissors. Basically, this guy who was obsessed with board games as a kid was bullied at school, so he comes back and tries to get all the bullies back by making them play these board games. Not a very good film, very low budget. and roughly directed. Next up we have Christmas Bloody Christmas, a movie I was quite anticipating actually. I love a Christmas horror movie, and this is about a Santa Claus, a robotic Santa Claus that escapes from them all and starts killing people with an axe. The kills were okay in this film, but what really made me dislike this movie is the main two characters. All they did was drop F-bombs at each other in every other piece of dialogue or every other sentence. And an example would be, what the fuck are you up to tonight? Come and have a fucking drink with me. Why not? Why not? What are you going to do? Fucking sit home and go and watch fucking movies on your fucking own? You might as well fucking come out with me. And he's like, yeah, okay, let's go and get a fucking drink. Fuck it, come on, let's go. Fucking hell, yeah, I've just fucking finished work, but yeah, it'd be good to have a drink after fucking work. That's what they speak like. I'm not even joking. Don't believe me? Go watch the first 10 minutes. You'll hear more F-bombs in that than an entire runtime of Goodfellas. Next up, we have Senior Year, starring Rebel Wilson, who was playing one of the most outrageous and weirdest characters I think I've ever seen in a movie. Now, she wants to be prom queen and she ends up being in a coma, waking up 20 years later, going back to her high school and wanting to become prom queen in that year because she is still a teenager in her head, just in a 35-year-old woman's body or however old she is in this movie. I don't mind the odd high school film and stuff, but Rebel Wilson really took me out of this movie. The side characters were doing nothing for me at all, and the film is definitely half an hour too long. Why Netflix persists to make these movies over 2 hours? It just didn't need to be. I mean, 2 hours isn't that long, but for this high school silly movie that is just got lots of filler in and spending a lot of time with this really annoying character, it's too long in my opinion when you look at it that way. That is Senior Year. Next up is the 355, a film a lot of people have on their top 10 worst of the year list. I think I went in thinking this was going to be absolutely awful, and it kind of was bad, but not as bad as I thought it was going to be. However, it still wasn't a very good movie. There's some good action scenes in this. Jessica Chastain carried the film, but there's okay other characters in there as well with Penelope Cruz and stuff. I just thought the plot was ridiculous, and Sebastian Stan, you could just tell he was going to be a villain within the first minute of the movie. But the plot was ridiculous. I mean, this device that can just blow the world up and end the world, and it's in a mobile phone device and everyone's trying to chase it. Yeah, it was just a bit ambitious for its own good, really. Next up, we have Sex Appeal, which is another high school teen comedy, and it's about this teenage girl who has to come up with an app, and she is the best. She wants to be the best student in her school, and she comes up with an app about sex, and she starts sort of doing sex projects with her best friend and sort of using them to get sexual data. Yeah, that's the best way I can explain this movie. Look, it was watchable, but the main character, the main teenage girl in this movie, forgot her name who plays, I'm really sorry, was just one of the most cringiest characters I've ever seen. I actually felt ashamed for her at times. I was kind of hiding behind my t-shirt going, is she really saying all this? It was alright, but very, very ridiculous. Next up, we have a film that ended up on my top 5 most disappointing of the year list after really enjoying The Murder on the Orient Express, and that is Death on the Nile. Kenneth Branagh was like a different character in this movie, even though he's playing Hercule Poirot. He was up his own arse in this film. He thought he was amazing, and he was just so great, and everyone should respect him. And this character even says to him in the movie, I've never met anyone who's so far up their own arse. And I was just nodding along going, yes, I agree. The first half an hour drags way too much. This film does not need to be 2 hours. Again, it sounds like I don't like 2-hour movies, but it's not that. It's just the first half an hour is nothing. It takes a while for them to get on the cruise ship. I guess they end after half an hour, which is not a good sign if you're a murder mystery movie. And I'm not really usually good at predicting these endings, but I guess this one, stacked cast, couldn't save it. It was just a very, very dull movie, very, very boring, dragged a lot in places. I didn't like it. at all, really. And it's Death on the Nile. Again, bad can sometimes be better than boring, and this was boring. Next up is a stack of movies that received 2.5 stars from me. First up, we have Joey King in The Princess. Now, this was a cool concept. It was kind of like The Raid, but in a castle where she's got to fight through all these rooms and fight all these enemies who are coming at her and stuff, because she's a bit of a rebel to the family she's born into. She doesn't want to marry this guy, I think. And the fight scenes are just something you've seen over and over again in hundreds and hundreds of other films, and they're a little bit over the top, and there's just no way. I mean, there's no way she could get out of some of these situations, but she does. And it's just a film I've seen a million times, but executed better in other movies. Joey King brought something to the movie, but she wasn't fantastic or anything, but she was a cool enough character, let's just say that. Next up, we have Virus 32, a film I was really looking forward to. I thought it sounded really interesting. This is a zombie outbreak film. I think it's Spanish. And this came to Shudder. And this is about a bunch of zombies that you can sort of freeze time for 32 seconds, or you do something to them and they will not attack you for 32 seconds, hence the name Virus 32. And I thought that sounded like an interesting concept. When I seen it on screen, it wasn't very good at all. It just didn't work for the film. There's some okay kill scenes and stuff. It's a watchable zombie outbreak film, but there's hundreds more out there that are better than this. Next up, we have Interceptor. Now, this is about a US defense base in the middle of the ocean that has to shoot down missiles if America is ever under attack, or nuclear warheads. If anything's ever coming to America to attack them, they will intercept and shoot it down. And 4 people work in this US base in the middle of the ocean. Again, felt like a very, very empty Netflix movie that was made during the pandemic. I mean, I might be wrong. These might not be made during the pandemic, but I just feel like that we got all them chunk of movies in one go this year at one point, and this was one of them, along with the other movies I mentioned before. It just felt very empty, kind of like Spiderhead, no atmosphere or whatever. But Chris Hemsworth's wife was actually a good character. I did like her in this. She was kind of cool, like some of the scenes she was involved in, kicking ass and stuff. It's just very unbelievable to me, like, this many people are in charge of defending the whole of the US in this one little empty place in the middle of the ocean, and it sort of gets took over by these terrorists, and you can actually believe it because there's no security or anything there. Yeah, a bit of a ridiculous film, but like I said, Chris Hemsworth's wife, she was the best thing about it. I thought she was awesome. Next up, we have The Ledge. Now, this is a sort of an isolation type movie with this woman who is running away from this guy and his friends who are sort of trying to sexually abuse her, and she gets stuck on this mountain and they're trying to get up and chase her, basically. And it was an okay idea, an okay concept. I didn't mind this film, but the main villain definitely dragged this movie down for me. He was ridiculous. He was a terrible actor. And some of the stuff he was saying and the way he was bullying his friends into making them help him. I mean, I would have just smacked him and said, "Shut the fuck up, mate, and sit down." He just looked like such an asshole, basically. And they were all terrified of him, and I just couldn't quite believe that. Some good scenes in this, especially the end. It wasn't a bad movie. It could have been better, though. Next up, we have The Curse of Bridge Hollow, a Halloween film that came to Netflix. Once again, there's a lot of Netflix movies in here. It stars Marlon Wayne and the young girl who plays Ella. Is it Ella of Stranger Things? I forgot her name, really. Sorry, but I actually do really like her character in Stranger Things. So I thought, why not? I'll give this a go. This is about a bunch of Halloween decorations that come to life on Halloween, believe it or not, because there's a curse in the town, and it's up to Marlon Wayans and his daughter to stop these decorations, basically, from attacking everyone. And it felt like a very, very goosebumpy type movie. It was okay. It was okay, but I thought the decorations looked terrible. It was just a very meh movie. I mean, there's not much to it. Just a film that Netflix said, let's get this out for Halloween, because everyone will watch it, because it's a Halloween movie, and not much thought's gone into it, really. Next up, we have Morbius. Now, I didn't hate this film as much as everyone, but it's still pretty low on the list at 103 there. This just felt like a very 2000s comic book film. I know everyone has said that, but that's exactly what it felt like. It's in the middle of a weird mess with the MCU and Sony Pictures. The after credit scenes were just so silly. And it had an okay story going for it. I didn't mind Jared Leto in the role and stuff. But it just does feel like a film that's just going to get put to one side and made with a big budget, which could have just went to something totally better. I do like the idea of vampires and stuff and the horror theme coming to the Marvel Universe and stuff, but not in this form. It needs to have a better direction, a better clear path, and I don't even know what the intentions were here, especially with them and the credit scenes. So it just felt like it belonged next to Daredevil, Elektra and stuff 20 years ago. Next up we have the Adam Project. I didn't like this movie too much. I mean, it had a good concept, but it just could have done more with it, I feel. This follows Ryan Reynolds, who goes to visit his former self as a young kid to help. I can't remember if he was trying to save the world or something, but he has to go and visit his former self to help his present self, basically. Yeah, it's a lot of time bending and stuff like that, but it's just not done in a very interesting way. It's not exactly Back to the Future or anything, and it's a kind of forgettable movie to me. Next up, we have my most disappointing movie of the year. It ended up number one on my most disappointing movies list, and that is Nope. Jordan Peele has made a solid couple of movies to me. I mean, Get Out I didn't love as much as everyone else, but I do acknowledge it's a very good film. I loved Us. Thought that was a great concept, executed brilliantly. I loved that movie. Creeped me the hell out. So I was kind of excited for Nope. I mean, he's done very two competent films, and I thought you can't really miss with this one, involving UFOs and it looked like, reminded me of when I watched Fire in the Sky as a kid, and that film creeped me the hell out. I was like, okay, let's do this. This is going to be a good film. Jordan Peele, summer horror movie. And it was one of the dullest movies of the year. Again, just took a long time to get where it was going. The payoff wasn't that good anyway. There was some really nice directed moments in this, and some great cinematography and stuff. Daniel Kaluuya done nothing for me in this movie in the lead role. I think this is the worst I've seen him in a movie. He was just nothing to him, nothing to his character. There was a side story involving a chimpanzee, and there were a lot of hidden messages in there, I'm sure, but I just didn't quite get that. I just thought, what is this doing in this film? It just didn't make sense to be in there to me. Now, I do plan on rewatching this movie because I know a lot of people have it in their top 10s and stuff. Maybe I'm wrong, but there's other people I've seen as well who also thought this was a big disappointment. But I am going to rewatch this again just to be sure, because I think it deserves another chance. Maybe I need to come in it at a different angle and not go in expecting what I was expecting. Coming in at the 100th place is going to be Enola Holmes 2. Now, I did like the first film. Thought it was decent enough. This one didn't quite live up to that movie for me. I thought it was just, the story wasn't as interesting, and I feel like we've been here before and they were just cashing in, not cashing in, but going off the success of the first film. Thought, yeah, we better make another one. Not much thought had gone into it. I did think the accents were very, very put on. It felt like a theatre production, like I was watching a stage show at times. The whole set design, the characters, the way they were dressed, and like I said, the accents, all just felt very theatrish to me. Millie Bobby Brown and Henry Cavill absolutely stood out a mile. They were by far the best cast members in this, but everyone else just really weren't doing it for me. And it was a very, very long film for what it should be as well. I think it was like 2 hours and 20 minutes. But yeah, not as good as the first movie, unfortunately. Next up, we have Hocus Pocus 2, a film I was very much anticipating, as I loved the first one. I watched this so much as a kid, and this was another disappointing movie for me. This came in my top 5 most disappointing movies of the year. Now, the Sanderson sisters really did jump back into the roles, and like they'd never been away. Chemistry was bouncing off each other. Kathy Nimaji, I think, made me realise that she is actually my favourite witch out of the three. She was really funny in this, just like she is in the first film. But the main characters were just very poor, just not a patch on Max Dennison and his friends in the first film, Alison and his sister. Not a patch on them. The whole trying to make a witch's coven and maybe even sympathise with the main witch, Bette Midler's character at the end. I was like, what? And the climax just took a while. It was just a bit of a mess towards the end. I was anticipating this film, but when I heard it was coming straight to Disney Plus, I was kind of like, oh, that's not a good sign. And it was a bit of a disappointment. Not a patch on the first movie. There was no magic there, let's say that. The magic was missing in this one. Next up, we have Michael Bay's Ambulance, and I thought this looked really good from what I'd heard and going by the trailers and stuff. And the first half an hour, I was like, wow, this movie is going to be great. And then it just became the same thing for 2 hours. Just Jake Gyllenhaal in a ambulance with his brother, and they're trying to escape the cops. There's a big high-speed chase. There's a guy in the back who needs medical attention, a nurse there who are sort of the hostages of this situation. But Michael Bay, he went through a lot of different camera angles, using lots of drones and stuff, and he tried to make this a big spectacle. But overall, for me, it just felt like a messy action flick. Now, Bad Boys 2, if you remember that film, Michael Bay done a big chase scene in that movie, but for me, it just felt the same thing for 10 minutes in that film. Cars are exploding everywhere, but there's no intensity or anything, and that's what this movie felt like, but just for 2 hours. Like I said, the first half an hour started brilliantly, and the next 2 hours just felt very, very repetitive, and there's a bunch of plot holes in there involving Jake Gyllenhaal's character that, for me, were just ridiculous. Next up, we have Strange World, one of the last films I watched this year as it landed on Disney Plus, and this is another Disney film that kind of just plays it very, very safe and doesn't shake up the Disney formula at all. You kind of know what's going to happen. You can predict what characters are and how they're going to turn out. They're not something they seem, and by the end of the movie, they're someone different. It's all just very, very predictable. This follows a family who are a bunch of explorers, and they end up going underneath our world into another world. And it started off okay, and then just became very average, and I just didn't care anymore. Good animation, always is from Disney, but by the end of the film, I was just like, nah. And I can sort of see why Disney probably didn't market this, because they had no faith in it. Next up, we have No Exit, and this was a really cool concept about a bunch of characters stuck in this motorway service station, basically, because of the bad weather, and one of them is a killer, or people are being killed off in the service station. It's kind of a whodunit thing. It started off so well for about 45 minutes and then kind of went very silly and didn't know how to end itself. I didn't mind this film. It was okay, but it just could have been better. Going by the concept and the first 40 minutes, I thought this was going to play out a lot better, but overall, it wasn't too bad. Next up, we have Moonfall, which for me was a very topsy-turvy movie. There was some great moments in this, but the story was kind of ridiculous, even though it was directed really well, and all the disaster parts were awesome. Cool characters. Patrick Wilson, I always like him, the guy off Game of Thrones who plays Sam. I forgot his name, sorry, but he was really good in this film as well. For me, I liked him in this. But if you didn't think the story was ridiculous enough, the last act, aliens started coming to it, and I was like, what the fuck is going on here? Bit of too ambitious, this movie. So it sort of fell flat by the end. But there's some cool action scenes and stuff, but that was about it. Next up is The Takedown, a buddy cop movie from France, starring Omar Sy, who I watched in the Intouchables, and I thought he was amazing in that, and that kind of drew me into this one. I thought this was funny in places, but overall it was just a very, very generic movie with not much of an interesting plot. Elvis and the other guy kind of make the film. They bounce off each other really well. But yeah, just a generic action buddy cop movie. That is The Takedown. And the last movie to receive a 2.5 stars on my Letterboxd is Minions: The Rise of Gru. Now, I've got to admit, the Minions just do nothing for me. I don't think they're very fun characters. They're just annoying. It's more Gru who I like in these films, and I was kind of glad he was in this one as a young boy, because he kind of brought this movie forward and made it enjoyable. If it was just based on the Minions, it would have probably pissed me off, and I probably would have made it unwatchable to me. But I do like Gru and what Steve Carell does with that character. It was okay. Typical child-friendly animated film that makes a lot of money, and it's no wonder they make them. I can't blame them if they go and make another one, because they do make a lot at the box office, don't they? I just fancied an easy watch one day, and I went with this. It was alright. Now, next up, all these films, this next batch of films, all received 3 stars. First up, we have the Bob's Burger movie. Now, this may have received a little bit more, like maybe 3.5, 4 even, if I'd watched the show, but I've never really watched the Bob's Burgers show. A lot of people said to me, you have to. But every time I went on Disney Plus, it was just staring at me, this big yellow poster, and I give it a go. It was an alright little concept. A big hole opens up at front of Bob's Burgers, and they can't sell any burgers because no one can come into the shop, and they're in a bit of a pickle there. And it just played out as a really fun story, but there was a few things that I didn't quite latch onto, and I could tell I probably needed to watch the show. The main family had a bunch of fun characters and stuff, but I give it 3 star. I did enjoy it, but nothing. Like I said, I probably didn't appreciate it because of the show. That is the Bob's Burgers movie. Next up, we have The House. This is one of the first films to release this year, and this is an anthology movie of 3 stories about 3 different houses, basically. And I thought the first story was really dark and creepy and clever. It kind of, I was like, oh, that is sort of a bit of a moody and bleak ending, if you like. And I thought that one was really good. The second story was the best, about this house, this rat invading this house and moving in with his rat friends and stuff. And this guy just couldn't do nothing about it. And they were overtaking the house. I thought that was really well done. The third story did kind of let it down for me, about this cat who can't get rid of this guy who's living in the hotel, I believe, or he won't leave, this tenant. It was an alright film. Nice stop motion animation and stuff. But yeah, very, very strange one. Next up, we have a Christmas film called Spirited, starring Ryan Reynolds and good old Will Ferrell from Elf, who's in another Christmas movie here. And this plays on the story of a Christmas carol, where Will Ferrell's job is to make someone every year, do the Scrooge type deal on someone every year. So he will make someone appreciate Christmas, and then the next year he'll move on to someone else, and it's Ryan Reynolds' turn. And a lot of people believe that he is unredeemable because he's that bad of a person, and Will Ferrell is determined to get him to be a good person, basically. And it's a bit of a musical. I didn't like the songs in this film, really, but and it started off very, very slow for the first half an hour, but then it became a really funny movie, actually. There was some really funny moments, and I laughed my ass off in quite a few places. Ryan Reynolds and Will Ferrell are fun enough in this film. It's a very average Christmas movie. Next up we're going to have probably the biggest shocker of the entire list for some people, being 89th, and a lot of people have it high on their list, but there is some controversial decisions in this list, and I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. This is just the way I seen it, and as the Woman King. Viola Davis was awesome in this. I thought she really put in a good performance. But there was too many moments for me where I just felt like nothing was really happening. And the story, I didn't really care too much. And then a great action scene had happened. And then we'd just have a bit of a lull. And a great action scene and a bit of a lull. So for me, it didn't really do as much or was impactful as other people seemed to get with it. But I mean, I feel bad putting it this low because I know it's probably a better film than I give it credit for, but I'm just going by this first time watch. I was just a little bit bored at times, but great action scenes, and Viola Davis was awesome. So next up, we have another animated film called Luck, which came to Apple TV. And this is about the most unluckiest girl in the world. Everything just goes wrong for her, from just everything in everyday life just goes wrong, and she finds this sort of world where she can sort of get luck and make her own luck and stuff. Now, this was very, very ambitious. It felt like it was trying to be a Disney movie and sort of wasn't executed as good as a Disney or Disney Pixar movie. I might sound like a hypocrite there because I put Strange World below it in this, but it did have them feels of what it was trying to be. And it just fell flat a little bit, especially in the last 30 minutes. But I did enjoy this movie in places, and her black cat, who she had as a pet, was a really fun character. And it was just fun to see her, how unlucky she was at the start of the movie in everyday life. But it wasn't bad, just kind of not executed as good as it could have been. Now, next up is a film that I have put on this list, and I do feel like I am being harsh here, because I probably shouldn't have even put this on the list, but that is Decision to Leave, because I wasn't in the right frame of mind going into this film. I wasn't in the mood for it. I don't even know why I watched it at the time, because I was very tired and stuff, and I was kind of getting lost with the film. It started off okay, but then it started to lose me a little bit, and that is my fault, because I should not have put on this really cool looking story with subtitles that I've got to read and stuff whilst being tired. So I do want to rewatch this film. I do feel like this is the only one I probably unfairly put on the list. So I just give it a 3-star, but I know it's probably better. And this is about a guy who investigates a murder, and he doesn't know if the woman he's investigating has actually murdered this man or it was an accident, and he starts falling for it a little bit there. So it's a good concept, but I need to watch it again. That is Decision to Leave. Next up is The Quiet Girl. Now, the reason I watched this is because I read an article where it said this is the only film not to receive any negative reviews from critics, so I gave it a watch. A lot of people on my Letterboxd actually were giving this good reviews, but for me, it just felt like a bit of a nothing movie. A girl who doesn't really live with a nice family, goes to stay with her other relatives and enjoys it there, and the relatives love having her, and then she's got to go back, and they don't want her to, and she doesn't want her to. That's it. Most of the movie was just her waddling around the house and talking to her relatives who've adopted her for the few weeks. It was nothing much happened. There was a good message at the very, very end, but a movie that just really didn't do much for me. Next up, we have Kimmy, starring Zoe Kravitz, who has some information to her murder, but she doesn't really like going out the house because it's the COVID pandemic, and she's got to get out there and face her fear and go and deliver this information, basically. I thought this was a cool concept. Technology was incorporated very well into the film, but I didn't love this as much as some people. Some people were raving about this movie when it came out, and I thought it was just a good, very good A to B film. That was it. Yeah, pretty average for me, really. Next up, we have Me Time, starring Kevin Hart and Mark Wahlberg. Now, this was an okay, fun time. Mark Wahlberg's character, though, was definitely the standout for me, because he's just this guy who is a bit of a loner. He doesn't have a girlfriend or anything, and he invites all these people to his birthday every year, but he just has the most outrageous birthday party you can think of, and he's 44, not exactly a 50th or a 40th, a 44-year-old in this, and he's just throwing the biggest party ever. He's got like a coach with his face on, and all these people have come to his party, and he's got money to burn. He's just, spending all kinds to have a fun time, and Kevin Hart is his old school friend, and he comes along for the ride while his wife's away for the weekend. Kevin Hart plays the same character as he did in Man from Toronto and other movies that he's been in, like Ride Along and stuff, where he wants to be a good husband. He always plays that character. And he feels bad on his wife when he's out there having fun. And it was okay. It was okay. I had a fun time with it. I've seen better comedies, but it was good enough. That is Me Time. Next up, we have Gold. Now, this was a really cool movie, actually. It's about these two guys who it's in like apocalyptic wasteland in the desert, and they come across some gold, and one of them but they sort of break down, and only one of them can travel to get the parts for the van that they need, because the both of them have been traveling across the desert, and one of them says, look, one of us has got to stay here with this golden nugget in case anyone else sees it, and one of us needs to go and get the parts for the van, because we need to get moving. And sorry, an excavator they need an excavator to get this gold out. And one of them says, I'll go and get the excavator, you stay with the golden nugget. So they agree, and this guy who's gone to get the excavator is just gone for days, and the other guy doesn't know if he's coming back or not, and he's starting to swelter in the desert, and it's kind of a waiting game. You don't quite know if anyone's crossing the other one. You just have to wait and see to the end. But I thought this was a really cool concept, and I really dug it. Next up, we have Studio 666, Dave Grohl and the Foo Fighters in a horror comedy movie, and they go to this recording studio to record the next album, basically, and the studio is haunted, and Dave Grohl starts getting possessed, and people are killed. It was okay, but very silly. The last 20 minutes took a while to end the movie, and there was some CGI blood in there. Can't we just have real blood, please? But overall, it was a fun enough time, but the Foo Fighters are not actors, are they? And you can tell. Next up, we have another disappointing movie of the year, and that is Jurassic World Dominion. Thought this was going to be a great setup after Fallen Kingdom with these dinosaurs running around the city and stuff, but it just didn't quite work, and they decided to put loads of locusts in there. They brought the legacy characters back who brought nothing to this movie whatsoever, and they were the key for me to making this one work. There were some good moments with the Velociraptor chase though, a dinosaur fight towards the end. The movie's just kind of dragged. I do think it's a very watchable Jurassic Park film, but it's one of the weaker ones for me. And overall, just disappointing because I really anticipated this one. Next up is a movie called The Bubble. A lot of people did not like this one at all, but there's a great cast in here. Pedro Pascal was definitely the best character in this film, and it's all about making a movie during COVID, but they all have to stay in this bubble, and it kind of mocks the whole situation, really. I thought this was fun, really funny moments in the film and stuff. Some characters bounced off each other, but again, it was just on way too, it was like half an hour too long, and by that time where you think it should have finished by now, the jokes start falling flat, and it's just like, okay, we get it. So overall, I didn't mind it. It was okay, but definitely belongs in the 3-star bracket. Nothing more than that. Next up, we have Cheaper by the Dozen, the first Cheaper by the Dozen film I've seen, to be honest. And I thought this was... I like the hectic family life that they have here, because the house is just... everyone is just everywhere and stuff, and it was really fun to watch that. It's kind of this dad who has to balance family life with his work life, and he wants the best for his family, but you got to go to work to make that happen. And you know, they kind of move into this neighborhood to try and make it work there, and some of the kids don't like it, so it's all this back and forth with the family, and who likes who, and where the other one wants to live, and agreeing, disagreeing, with some funny moments thrown in. I thought this was fine. Didn't mind it at all. Next up is Deep Water, another film a lot of people did not like, but I actually kind of like this one. Ana de Armas and Ben Affleck, who are in a very strange relationship. I think that's the worst thing about this film, because Ben Affleck just lets her go and sleep with whoever she wants, and she does it. And it's like this mutual agreement they've got. I thought that was very strange. But people she is sort of in having flings with and stuff start to die, and you're thinking, is it Ben Affleck killing them or whatever? But this was a really decent thriller. It just had some stupid moments that shouldn't have been there, really, especially the whole concept. Overall, I didn't mind this one. That is Deep Water. Next up is Lightyear, one of the most disappointing films of the year for me, kind of like Strange World. It just felt like very generic and something we've seen from Disney all along. This film was trying to be Interstellar, but animated, and again, it was a little bit too clever for its own good. I thought this started off really well, where it said a kid called Andy got his favourite toy from his favourite movie, and I was like, oh, so they're going to just show us the movie that Andy liked as a kid from Toy Story. But yeah, the side characters done nothing for me. Buzz wasn't even that much interesting in this one. And overall, it just follows the same formula that Disney films have followed for years. Next up, we have Day Shift, a vampire film that all takes place in the day, and that is the biggest problem. I don't think it works. I think vampire films should definitely be taking place at night, and that's when the vampires feel very threatening and stuff. But this was just a silly movie. I mean, he walks into a shop at one point, opens this door at the back, and we are walking into this big vampire company that kills vampires, and it's all like a big business. Snoop Dogg's in there and stuff. It was just a very strange film, but there was some moments I did like, and one of these moments is probably one of the best scenes of the year. They go into a vampire nest, these Jamie Foxx and these other three vampire hunters, and kick ass, and it was really well filmed and stuff. So it did have its moments, but again, just a very average Netflix film in the end. Next up, we have VHS 99, and this is the first VHS film I've seen, but like a lot of other anthology films, some stories are good, some stories are bad, aren't they? And that was the case with this one. There was a one where a girl has to agree to staying in a coffin overnight to get into this sorority house, which is probably the best story. There was another one where this gang who they're trying to be like jackass, doing all these stunts and stuff, and they notice something across the street and start filming the woman over the road. Thought that was a really good story as well. But there were other ones, like one that happens in hell at the end, which just did nothing for me. So it was a very mixed bag, and all in the found footage aspect, which I do like found footage, but again, when some of them stories are good and some of them are bad, it's going to end up low on the list, isn't it? Next up is The Railway Children Return. I watched the trailer for this, and me and my wife said, you know what, that just looks like an easy watch, a nice fun family film, and we decided to watch it, and it wasn't bad. Thought the kids all acted well in this, and this is basically about a bunch of kids who go to in the wartime, have to go and live with their random family to take care of them, and it's just them basically in the countryside, and they find this soldier who is hiding, and they decide to protect him, but he's not really fully telling them the full story, basically. Yeah, it was alright. There's The Railway Children Return. Next up is Dog, starring Channing Tatum, who basically wants to get back in the army, and the commander says, look, if you look after this dog, bring them to this funeral, I might let you back in. But at the end, we're going to kill the dog. So you're going to have to be prepared to let go, basically. And he travels across country with this dog and starts getting a bond with him. And I did like the story and the way Channing Tatum sort of befriended this dog. It was a nice, heartfelt story. A little bit predictable. Next up is The Lost City, probably the most 3-star movie out of all the 3-star movies on this list. I think all my friends have given this 3-star. It was a fun time. Again, Channing Tatum in here with Sandra Bullock, and Daniel Radcliffe as the villain was interesting, let's say that. I don't think he was a terrible villain, but he wasn't a very good one. He was just interesting, let's put it that way. Some really cool moments in this. A moment I really didn't see coming. I was like, wow, what the fuck was that? I didn't expect that at all. Just a fun little adventure movie, wasn't it? Not much more to say about that. Next up, we have Elvis from Baz Luhrmann. Now, I was quite anticipating this one. I'm not usually a music biopic person, but after watching Bohemian Rhapsody and Walk the Line and stuff, I thought, you know what, this could be good. It's a story about Elvis, one of the best musicians and artists of all time. Yeah, let's go. And the problem for me was the directing and the editing. This film just felt like one big long trailer for me. It was just 30 seconds, cut to the next scene, cut to the next scene, after another 20 seconds, cut to the next scene. I was just like, oh, why are you making the movie like this? So Austin Butler was definitely the star of this show. I thought he was awesome as Elvis Presley. He really did nail the role. But it was a heartfelt story, good journey to go on with his life. Tom Hanks was an asshole, and that's portrayed really well on screen as to the downfall of Elvis, really, and how much of it was down to him. But the editing, for me, was the main problem of this film, unfortunately. Next up, we have She Said, which is about the Harvey Weinstein scandal and how it all came to light with the New York Times getting it out there publicly and bringing Harvey Weinstein to face the courts, basically. it's just a very, very talky film. This is film very heavy on dialogue, and I don't mind that sometimes, but I just thought it was a little bit clever for its own good in places. But there were some great performances in there. I think the subject matter has got to be your type of thing. I watched a film called Bombshell last year, and I thought it was a little bit better than this, and follows the very much the same story path involving the Fox News guy. It wasn't bad. I didn't love it as much as some people. Next up is Orphan, First Kill, a film that I just didn't think needed to be made, but yeah, it wasn't bad. This is a prequel to the first movie. I went in thinking, how are they going to de-age Esther? But they done it really well. She did look like a little girl, and she's a fully grown woman now. And the twist in this film was a really good twist, actually. I didn't see that coming in a million years. I just thought we were going to get, oh, Esther, invading this family, just killing them all, like she did in the original movie, really. Yeah, we're going to get more of that. But there was a big twist in there that I didn't see coming, and I thought, you know what, they've tried there with that script. It wasn't bad. Next up, we have Men from Alex Garland. Now, I thought this film started off really well, actually. The first hour was very interesting, very intriguing, with some really creepy moments, especially the naked stalker guy. It's about this woman who goes to the countryside, and the guys around there aren't very nice to her. And some people may see that as, hating on male and stuff, and I'm not going to argue with anyone who thinks that. But the last half an hour, it just went into strange territory, and I thought, oh, why have you ended the film like this? So it brought it down a little bit for me. But yeah, some really creepy out moments, good performances, and I didn't mind it. Just wish they could have ended it better. That is Men. Next up is Home Team, one of the first films released this year, and I do like a good sports comedy. Kevin James, I think he plays two different people in this film. He is a coach of a big US football team, and I think he has to go and coach his son's team. And yeah, it's just his son sort of getting to know him a bit better as he coaches this team and stuff. It was alright. Some funny moments. Very, very predictable though, like a lot of sports movies. It done the job. Next up is The Grey Man, a film which had a heavy budget from Netflix, and they went all in with this film. This follows Ryan Gosling, who's a bit of a hitman here, and this other guy, Chris Evans, is hot on his tail, and he was really good as the villain, actually. He's got this little moustache there, he wears t-shirts that are 3 sizes too small, but you know what, I thought Chris Evans was awesome in this. Ryan Gosling always puts a good performance in, but again, it was just for the big budget movie, you just want a little bit more, and it was just the most, again, like The Lost City, just the most 3-star movie you'll ever see. I hear we're getting sequels and stuff, and they're going all in with this Netflix, but you just expect a little bit more, I think. But it was okay, it was a fun time. Next up, we have Bullet Train, which is about a bunch of hitmen and hit women, if you like, on a bullet train, and they are all very different characters. Kind of animated characters, basically. It kind of reminded me of a Guy Ritchie movie where someone would come on screen and say the name and stuff like that, and people are chasing people on the train, people are after other people, and it becomes a little bit bloody and violent. The Brad Pitt was the star of this film, but he was the most least interesting character for me, which is strange to say about Brad Pitt. Some cool action scenes, stuff like that, but I didn't love this movie as much as everyone else, and again, another one that felt way too long. This could have been cut by 20 minutes easily. Overall, it wasn't bad. Next up is Catwoman Hunted, a animated movie done in the same style as the Batman ones, but this one just follows Catwoman, and there was a lot of jazz music playing in the background of this one, which was very strange, but it kind of worked. Again, just like the Batman movies, nicely animated, nicely voiced. And yeah, I thought it was interesting to see Catwoman go on a little bit of a journey here. I think people are hunting her down because she stole this jewel. Can't quite remember the full plot, but I remember enjoying it. That is Catwoman Hunted. Next up, we have Deadstream, and this is about a YouTuber who is desperate to get his followers and his subscribers back, and he decides to go to the most haunted house in the town, or in the world, or whatever it is, and he's going to stay the night there and set all these cameras up, and everyone tunes in. and some weird freaky shit starts to happen in there. My main problem with this film was the main guy was just so annoying. He was screaming all the time and being very animated, and I was just like, oh man, shut up. Please, if they had a better acting in there, this could have worked well, a lot better. But it's an okay horror found footage film with a bit of comedy thrown in. Next up we have Do Revenge, another Netflix high school movie. Oh, are they in a boarding school in this? I can't quite remember, but it seems like a much more posher school for richer kids and stuff. And this follows Maya Hawke and is it something Mendes, Amelia Mendes or something? I forgot her name, I'm really sorry, but she was great in this movie. And them two are fucked over by their boyfriends or whatever, or two people fucked them over and they decide to become friends and help each other get back at the other one. Seen this one a few times, but there's a twist in there that I kind of didn't see coming, which is quite clever. A little bit long, once again. Netflix just throw these long movies out that don't need to be as long. But I had a fun time with this. Definitely better than Senior Year. Anyway. Next up, we have Fall. Now, this is about these two teenage girls who basically are in love and climbing. They are climbers. And one of the girls' boyfriends dies. And she's in a bad place. And the other one goes, look, we're going to go and climb the biggest tower in the city. Oh, I can't remember what it is, but it's quite a very, very high tower. One of the biggest in the world, like these radio towers. We're gonna just go out there and get you out the house, and we're gonna do this. And they get to the top and get stuck because something sort of snaps, and they are stuck up there and no one to help them, and they're just isolated. I thought this was quite good actually. If you're got a fear of heights, you might not like this movie, but there's a few twists and turns along the way involving the two girls and their backstories, and then you're just wondering how the hell they're going to get off this damn thing. Very, very isolated film for the two of them. I enjoyed this one. I know a lot of people hated it, but I didn't think it was too bad. Next up, we have Black Adam, another big budget movie with The Rock. This wasn't bad. I mean, it was just basically The Rock as sort of an anti-hero in this, which was interesting to see. Some really cool characters and action scenes that, but I remember just watching it going, I've seen this before. It was just one of them comic book films that we've seen a million times. That was the big problem with it. It tried, but it doesn't look bright, the future for Black Adam now, does it? So it feels like a bit of a nothing movie, especially with the end credit scenes as well. Yeah. I say solid, a competent enough comic book movie. Next up, we have Sonic 2. I was kind of anticipating this one. I enjoyed the first movie, but I'm a big fan of the Sonic games as a kid. It was the first video game I ever played, so I was really up for this. And it was a fun time. I thought the introduction of Knuckles, played by Idris Elba, was fantastic. He was great. Tails as well. It was good to see the gang fully come together. The human part of the story is the big problem for me. They definitely need to get away from that now in Sonic 3, which is coming. And there was a whole wedding scene in the middle that just everyone agrees shouldn't be there. That was the worst part. And I was just like, why are you doing this? Just focus on our Sonic and Knuckles characters and Robotnik and leave all this shit. The kids don't even care about this. The adults don't care about it. Who is this wedding scene with these human characters for? But great voice animation and stuff as usual, and Jim Carrey again is awesome as Robotnik. And I can't wait for Sonic 3. It just wasn't as good as the first movie for me. Thought the first one a little bit better there. Next up, we have Barbarian, which is a lot of people's favourite horror movie of the year. And you know what? The first 40 minutes of this film, I thought it was going to be as well. I thought this was a real great setup. It had one of the scariest movie moments I've ever seen, with our main character going down a set of basement stairs and you don't quite know what's down there. The way it was filmed was awesome. Really well directed, really well built up. So tense. My wife fell asleep and I turned to her and noticed she was sleeping. It scared me even more because I was on my own. Everything after that, it just went a little bit silly for me. And I just kind of went, oh, why did you go down this path? But I didn't hate it. I had a good enough time with it. I just didn't love it as much as everyone else. That is Barbarian. Next up is Mr. Harrigan's Phone. I was always going to watch this. Now I've started my Stephen King series. And this is about a young boy who goes to read to this billionaire, and the billionaire pays him. But like 6 or 7 years later, this kid's turned like into a teenager now, but he still does it because he's got this connection with this old guy played by Donald Sutherland, and he decides to get Donald Sutherland a phone, and Donald Sutherland starts to become obsessed with this phone and stuff. He then dies, and the young boy is starting to get messages of Donald Sutherland from beyond the grave. So there's a whole supernatural element to it there. I thought this film was really good, actually. I just wish we got a little bit more from it in the second half, and it had a bit of a better payoff. But really, like the chemistry between them two, you felt the friendship there. And Donald Sutherland's just an awesome actor now. He's just elite level, isn't he? And he's great in this as well. I did like this movie. It just could have had a little bit more oomph in the final act. Next up, for the final 3-star movie on my Letterboxd rankings, is The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, I was highly anticipating this film. It was up there with Terrifier and Batman for me. I'm a huge fan of the original. I thought this was a competent Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. All the violence was there, the feel of the 70s, bringing back the main character from the first film. Is it Pam? No. What's her name? Sally. Bringing her back. Kind of tried to do the Halloween deal with Jamie Lee Curtis and stuff, but it was nice to see what had happened to that character because we didn't hear nothing from it after the first film, after they're just screaming on the truck. Some of the kills in this were great. I just wish they didn't make Leatherface kind of like Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers, because he's not that type of character, this overpowering monster, basically. He's more of a totally mentally deranged character, really. So I did kind of wish they didn't go down that route, but I had a good time with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The bit in the cornfields was so well filmed and stuff, and I hope we get another one. I really do. A lot of people did watch this on Netflix, so hopefully Netflix will bring that. The end credit scene did sound a liner up for that, so that is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, this next chunk of movies all received a 3.5 star on my Letterboxd. And next up, we have Sea Beast. Now, this was a very well made animated film. The locations look great. The character designs were great. My biggest problem was the actual sea creatures. They looked very, very bland, and it made the animation be very mismatched. And I was like, why did you pay all the attention to everything else and not the actual sea beast monsters, which is the title of your film? But it was okay. It was kind of like How to Train Your Dragon with sea creatures, basically. It was alright. If that's your type of thing, definitely give it a go. Next up, we have another film with Beast in, and that is just Beast, not the Sea Beast, starring Idris Elba, who goes up against a massive tiger or lion. Is it a lion? A lion, sorry, in the middle of the jungle, and he has to protect his family from this relentless beast, basically. And I had a good time with this. It was very tense in places, very well filmed, and the CGI was quite good, actually. I'm not really a massive fan of CGI, but when it's done right, I can appreciate it, and this one was. So, yeah, didn't mind this one at all, and that is Beast. Next up, we have Resurrection, starring Jennifer Hall. Now, this was such an interesting film. I was so invested, so intrigued as to what was going on. Basically, her and her daughter live on their own, and this guy comes back from her past and starts bribing her and stuff, and she's like, get away from my daughter, don't come near her, get out my life. And he's just like, yeah, you better do this if you want me to leave. And he's played by Tim Roth, and he's just a very creepy and strange character. And Jennifer Hall is losing her shit because something has happened in the past that we don't quite know about yet between these two characters, and she's kind of scared but angry at the same time. And she put in a hell of a performance here. There's a bit of a 5 or 10 minute monologue scene she goes on, which is great. I know everyone's talking about Mia Goth in Pearl, but she does it here, and she is very competent in doing that. Thought she put an excellent performance in. The main problem with me is the third act. It fell flat again, kind of like the movie Men and stuff, where I was so invested, and then it just went, oh. And I kind of just didn't get it, to be honest. I had to Google what had happened, and I still didn't quite get the ending. It's very, very mixed in the messages and stuff. So the third act felt flat for me after being a very interesting movie for the first hour. Next up, we have Dario Argento's Dark Glasses, a very short film. I think this is like 1 hour and 20 minutes. and this follows a prostitute who has been blind from an accident, but there's this guy going around killing prostitutes, and it's a mystery movie really, and she used the help of this young boy to track down this killer. It was alright. It's nothing on Deep Red or anything like that, but it's just a very, if you want a Dario Argento quick fix, this will probably do it for it. It still had the giallo style in there with the directing and the music and stuff, so it wasn't bad. Next up is See How They Run, another murder mystery film, and this one was quite fun actually. I loved the way it played on itself by being a bit of a parody of itself, where they break the fourth wall and go, if this was a murder mystery movie, then this would happen. You know, talking to the audience, and that kind of worked. For Sam Rockwell and Saoirse Ronan were great together in this movie, trying to solve the mystery who killed this director, played by Adrian Brody, who is also great in this, but he was only in it for about 15 minutes. And I didn't guess the end, which is a good sign, really. I like playing along with these movies. I love murder mystery movies, and this was a decent one. And I think it's dropped on Disney Plus, so it's worth checking out. That is See How They Run. Coming in at number 50 now is Sissy. Now, this was a slasher film where a bunch of characters go to this like secluded location, like this cabin in the forest, basically. And they bring along this girl, Sissy, because this girl, who's, I think it's a Hindu, hasn't seen her for years, and she invites her along. And when she gets there, there's this other girl there who goes, why have you brought her? Don't you know what she done to me and stuff like that? And you're kind of like, oh, what's happened here between these two? And the film unravels itself. People start to die, and it becomes a bit of a slasher film. I thought this was really good, actually. One of the more underrated horror movies of the year. That is Sissy. Next up, we have Athena. Now, this opening to this film was probably the best opening to any movie this year, if memory serves me well. I couldn't quite believe what the hell I was seeing. I don't know how the director filmed this. It was all in one big shot take, and this is about a bunch of characters who are fed up with the police brutality, and they decide to raid the police station, make a mockery of the police, rob all their weapons and stuff, and get back to this estate where they live. And then the police come after them, and it becomes a big war on the streets. But that opening, where they get in that police station, was nothing short of extraordinary filmmaking. I couldn't believe it. One of the best movie moments of the year. There's a lot of one-shot takes and stuff after that, but it didn't. The emotional impact of the film kind of lost me halfway through. But overall, it was still a good film. You know, I just cared less and less about some of the characters as it went on, basically. But overall, I still think this is definitely worth a watch. Next up, we have Violent Night. Die Hard meets Home Alone, with Father Christmas thrown in, kicking ass. And John Leguizamo really was a great villain in this. You really wanted Santa to kick his ass. I forgot, what's his name? David Harbour. I knew I'd get it. He is Santa Claus, and he's getting fed up at Christmas and no one believing in the Christmas spirit and stuff. And he goes to this house where a bunch of hostages have been taken by John Leguizamo and his team, and he sees an opportunity to let his anger out and kick some ass here. I just wish there was a bit more Christmas spirit towards the end of the movie to make it more of a Christmas feel type film. But overall, this was a really fun time. And I went in expecting that, and it's exactly what I got. That is Violent Night. Next up, we have Hustle, an Adam Sandler movie where he's more of a serious role here as a basketball coach. He sees potential in this young man, and the club he tries to get them to sign for don't want to know. They're like, nah, I don't think he's that good. But Adam Sandler will persist. He knows how good this guy is. It's a little bit of a predictable story, but yeah, just a sports film, a very competent one, and Adam Sandler is great in this. Adam Sandler is such a good actor. Whether you like him for his comedy or his serious roles, I think he does both really well, and I like to see him in these more serious roles now and again. Yeah, it was a really, really good movie that, you know, kind of root for the character that he's got his eye on, basically, and you kind of want him to make it. Next up is Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. I'm kind of thinking I probably should have put this on my most surprising list, because I kind of didn't expect anything from this film, and it was way better than it had any right to be. This is about Chip and Dale. One of them has gone on to stardom and the other one hasn't, and he's got a better character animation than the other one, which is really funny. So both of them are in different animations. One is in like I think it's like the Pixar style, and the other one is still just like cartoonish. And there's lots of great cameos in here. Ugly Sonic is in there, yes. Do you remember when they designed Sonic and everyone kicked off and they made him look better? Well, Ugly Sonic is in this movie. You got a really great villain. I'm not going to say who it is, but the way they made him look as an older character than what he did in this Disney animated film was so fun to me. And this was just a really good story. Just a really fun animated film. Next up, at 45 place, is one that did make it on my most surprising list because I thought the trailer looked quite ridiculous. And this is Marry Me. Now, this is about Owen Wilson taking his daughter to see this singer who she loves, and they're getting married on stage, this singer and this other celebrity guy, and she finds out right before the wedding that he's cheated on her, and Owen Wilson's got this sign saying "Marry Me" for some reason, I can't quite remember, and she goes, "Yes, I'll marry you," and marries Owen Wilson on stage, and he agrees to it. And that is a ridiculous concept, but these two characters do actually make it believable, and the chemistry with them, you do actually root for them, you do think they can actually, sort of fall in love. And it makes the ridiculous concept a competent one. There's that word again. I thought this was a really fine comedy. And yeah, like I said, you root for the character. I love Owen Wilson. I do. I think he's a great actor. I'll watch anything with him in. But J-Lo was actually really good in this as well. And it worked for me. And I never thought it would. Next up is Apollo 10.5, A Space-Age Childhood from director Richard Linklater, I believe. I haven't seen it before, trilogy. I'm not going to pretend I know what movies this guy makes and how good of a director he is. But this was a really well-narrated film by Jack Black, who narrates really this whole story, and it's about him and his family living around the space station area as kids in the 60s, and I could have just listened to this for the next 10 hours. If this movie was going on for so long, just with Jack Black narrating his childhood, I would have watched it because it was just so easy to listen to and to watch. And he's talking about what him and his sisters used to get up to, what they used to watch on TV, and what used to happen at school. Just simple things, but it worked. When it started going into the second half of the film and tried to do something different, that's where it kind of didn't work for me. But this first half of the movie was so strong, I loved it. Second half wasn't too bad, it just wasn't a patch on the first, but I was blown away by the way Jack Black just told this story, and I could have listened to it all day if it was all like the first half of the film. But overall, not a bad movie at all. Next up we have Watcher, which for me was excellent thriller, basically, horror type deal about this horror thriller, let's call it. This girl who moves to Romania with her husband because that's where he's from, and she feels very alone in this city, and she starts to think everywhere she goes this guy is watching her. It was really creepy in places. I didn't quite know if she was being paranoid or she was actually getting watched, and as the movie plays out, you just get more and more interested. And there was a great moment involving a wave here. I'm not going to say anything else, but Maika Monroe was excellent in this film. You'll probably remember her from It Follows. She led the movie so well, and it played out. I wish it played out so well. I just wish we would have got a little bit more from the last 10 minutes, but overall, a pretty solid horror thriller movie. That is Watcher. Next up, we have Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Sam Raimi has had a little go at MCU movie here now, and you can definitely tell with all the horror-related things going on in this. It was kind of like a slasher in places, especially in the middle of the movie involving Elizabeth Olsen's character. The movie started off very well, and there was some great cinematography and directing on here, especially with the jump scene involving America Chavez. I thought that was really a great moment in the movie where they were just jumping from universe to universe every 2 seconds. The middle of the film with the Illuminati and stuff didn't quite work for me. But then it did pick up at the end and felt very Sam Raimi-ish. And you could feel that he was the director of this film. Overall, not bad. I thought it would have been a little bit better, but definitely better than the first Doctor Strange film for me, definitely. Next up is Not Okay, one of the most interesting films of the year. I really did enjoy this one. This follows Zoe Douche, who you probably remember from Zombieland as the young girl. And she is desperate to become famous, and she tells everyone she's going to Paris. And she doesn't actually go, and there's a terrorist attack there. And she starts photoshopping herself into pictures of Paris, and everyone thinks she's been caught up in this terrorist explosion. And she goes back and tells her story, basically, but it's just one big lie for her to get famous. And she's a bit of an asshole, and you kind of dislike her for doing this. But you can tell she has got a bit of a heart deep down. She starts going to all these therapy sessions and stuff, and she makes friends with this girl, and you really kind of want it to work out for them, but you know it never can, because the lie she's told this girl who survived the mass shooting, basically. It's a very interesting movie. I do recommend it. I thought Zoe Douche was awesome in this. Great movie. Next up, we have Halloween Ends, probably the most controversial film of the year. When I first seen the first opening scene in this, and there was a murder, and it wasn't involving Michael Myers, I was just like, where's this movie going? 20 minutes in, I was like, okay, this is something totally different. I wasn't expecting anything from this movie after really not liking Halloween Kills. Now, I am in the actual camp of actually liking this film. As you can tell, it's quite high on the list out of 125 films here. I get why people don't like it. I can totally get why Halloween fans hate it. But after watching Halloween film after Halloween film, I binged the entire franchise leading up to this. I was appreciating the ones that were giving me something different, and this one definitely did. I didn't see this story path coming at all, and it worked for me. Rohan Campbell was excellent in the main role. He kind of carried the film when he was just this no one, basically. Unless he has been in other films, I just haven't seen them. But he was excellent in this. People might complain that Michael Myers isn't in this movie enough. Fair enough, I get it. But the whole concept of the town having evil instilled into it because of Michael Myers, and it can catch on, it worked for me. But it won't work for everyone else, that is a fact. Next up, we have possibly the most overrated film of the year, but I still liked it, as you can tell, because it's on this list, and that is Aftersun. But the people giving this movie 5 stars and stuff, I just don't get that. Again, I give it 3.5. It's just a film about these two people, this father and daughter, sorry, who go on holiday, and that's it. You just see them playing pool, you see them watching the karaoke show. Nothing. I was expecting something or waiting for something, but it never does. Now, maybe that's the whole point of the film. It probably is. Maybe I'm missing something. I don't know. But for me, what I seen with my own 2 eyeballs, it just wasn't a 5-star film. However, I liked the 2 characters. I was still interested, even though not much was happening. It was nice to just watch these 2 people on holiday. And they had great chemistry together. Both of them were really competent actors. It was just all right. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I did enjoy this movie. I just didn't love it like everyone else. Film of the year? No chance for me. But a very good movie. Next up is Windfall. I think I liked this movie a lot more than other people, because I'd seen a few low scores for this, but I was interested in this film from start to finish. This follows Jason Segel from Forgetting Sarah Marshall in a more serious role here, and he's robbing this house. He doesn't think the owners are there because it's like their holiday home. And as he's there, them 2 come home, and he's kind of in a situation where he can't let them go. For some reason, I can't remember the reason. He can't let them go or he's going to get caught, and they're sort of stuck in the house together, these 3 people. It actually worked for me, especially when you heard some of the backstories going on with these characters, what the situation was, how it was going to play out. I enjoyed this from start to finish. It was a really well-paced film, and it totally worked for me. Next up is Fresh. Sebastian Stan dates Daisy Edgar Jones, who both kind of hate dating because they're sick of it, and they seem to become a little bit of a match, but one of these characters has a bit of a strange side to them, and it goes down some very, very dark places while being quite comedic at the same time. I don't want to say too much about this because you haven't seen it. It's very hard to explain what the story's about, but it sort of plays on how dating sucks, and you kind of got to be careful who you date, I suppose. Like I said, I don't want to say too much more from it, but definitely goes down all the horror routes and stuff, and it worked for me. Yeah, I enjoyed this one. That is fresh. Next up, we have Turning Red from Pixar. I really dug this movie. This is about a young girl who, when she gets emotional and stuff, turns into this big red panda. And she's got all these friends and stuff who are trying to help her through it. Now, her friends were really good side characters. I think that's what helped the movie along. And then the third act ends up becoming this big kaiju Godzilla type deal thing, and I thought that was very interesting. Overall, I thought this was a good Pixar film. Not one of their best, but I enjoyed it. Great animation, very, very colourful movie, and a bunch of fun characters, and an interesting concept. With this girl just turned into a panda now and again, so yeah. Next up, we have The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. And this was I love the way it sort of just uses Nick Cage as his own character. Pedro Pascal pays him to come on the island because he's his biggest fan. And these two just become best of friends. Great chemistry together. They are two fine actors. I will watch almost anything these two are in. And I loved the way Pedro Pascal and Nicolas Cage are finding out about each other. And Nicolas Cage says, "What are your top 3 movies?" And his number 1 is the same as Nicolas Cage's. And he goes, "Okay, what's your other one?" And he goes, "Face Off." Nicolas Cage goes, "Oh yeah." And he goes, "I'm not telling you the third one." And he goes, "Why? Why wouldn't you tell me my third favourite movie?" He's asking him for ages, and he goes, "Okay, I'll tell you." And he goes, "What is it?" And he goes, "Paddington 2. And they watch Paddington 2 together and just cry at the end. I went and watched Paddington 2 after this. But yeah, great bromance movie. Some really funny scenes in this, especially where they're both paranoid, running around the town and stuff. I don't know if they've had drugs or something, but it's just so paranoid and they think everyone's watching them. The second half of the film, the laughs kind of stopped. It was so funny. The second half or the third act kind of started feeling flat, and that's why it's a little bit more lower on this list for me. But overall, I had a good time. Next up is The Bad Guys, an animated film about these animals who you probably prejudge to be bad animals. They've got a snake in there, a fox, a spider, and they basically rob banks. And the fox character sees the good in people, and he wants to become good and leave his friends behind because they're just so bad, basically. And I thought this was a really cool animated movie. I think it's from DreamWorks. It totally worked for me. Very, very fun film. Definitely aimed at kids, but no, I had a good time at this one. And I don't know if this is, for me to put it past Turning Red and Strange World and stuff, it's one of the best animated films of the year. Next up is Speak No Evil, a film I've never felt so much uncomfortable watching since this one in my life. This is about a family who meet another family on holiday and they become good friends with them. And then they write to them when they go home and say, "Look, you should come and stay with us because we miss you." So the family go and stay. And weird things start to happen. One of the families starts acting very, very strange, telling the other family's kid off and stuff. And I was just watching it going, "Oh my God, this movie, man, I just don't feel right watching this." And it gets worse and worse and worse. To the point where I was screaming at the screen at these characters to just get the fuck out of there. It worked for what it was going for. It was very effective. I was just annoyed by the characters sometimes. I just wish they would have been a bit stronger in some situations. But for the fact that I was squirming and had behind my t-shirt because I was like, "Whoa, what the hell is going on here? This doesn't feel right," is effective enough, and it set out what it was meant to do. Next up we have Scream, but I'm going to call it Scream 5 because that's what it should be called. Yeah, another Scream movie came. I watched the other 4 in preparation for this, and this, I do prefer 3 of the other Scream movies over this, but this was still a solid slasher. It's a very strong franchise. I did not guess the end of this one, which is always a good sign. Some great kills in here as usual and stuff. I liked these new characters who come, Jenna Ortega, Melissa Barrera, and their friends. I think they're good characters to lead the franchise going forward. We've got Scream 6 coming this year, which they're starring in again. The legacy characters came back for this one, and they kind of just stayed in the background where they should, and they're sort of getting phased out a little bit now, but help enough with the situation as well at the same time. I don't know the whole story about Neve Campbell, I'm not going to get into that, but overall this was a very enjoyable Scream movie, and I never get tired of Ghostface's voice on that phone there. So Scream 5, solid horror movie, and it made it into my top 10 horror films of the year at 10. Next up we have The Black Phone, based on the short story by Joe Hill. The Grabber is such a sinister character played by Ethan Hawke here, and this is basically about him going around this neighborhood in the 70s, kidnapping and killing kids. And he kidnaps this one kid and throws him down the basement, basically, and he's got him held hostage in his home. And there's a phone there, and it goes down a bit of a paranormal route where this kid is on the phone to the other kids who've been murdered there, and they're showing him ways how to get out of this situation. My biggest problem with this is there was not enough explanation as to why the kid who's been kidnapped, his sister could have all these visions and find out where he was and stuff, and the paranormal aspect wasn't explained very well. I think this would have worked a lot more better as a more realistic film, but overall I still had a very good time with it. Some really nice shots, some very creepy moments, especially when the grabber's just grabbing these kids and fucking throwing them in the van, in this black van he's got, and there's a moment where he's waiting at the top of the stairs for one of the kids, which really freaked me out. Overall, a very good horror movie. Next up we have another horror film, and that is Hellraiser. I was very much anticipating this film with the new Pinhead played by Jamie Clayton, and everyone was sort of, it came up in discussion about the gender swap for Pinhead, but I think that totally worked. Pinhead isn't the most strongest of characters in the original films, and I think he definitely needed a fresh new approach, and Jamie Clayton pulled it out the park here, in my opinion. It's a film of two halves. The first half is basically the setup. The second half all takes place in the one location with the Cenobites and stuff. Yeah, I thought this reboot of Hellraiser was really good, actually, and I think they can take it forward and bring more sequels out and play on this concept. Very interesting movie, and yeah, had its fair share of violent moments as well, which a Hellraiser movie should have. Next up we have Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, and I loved all the stop motion animation in this. A really emotional film that really does pull at the heartstrings, especially towards the end. But the voice acting was great. Pinocchio himself was such a funny character. I was laughing my ass off at some point, especially where he's telling, is it Gestacho? I forgot the old guy's name. It always escapes my mind, but he's basically telling him off. And he's like giving a cheek to him and stuff. Well, that was really funny. Yeah, really solid vision from Guillermo del Toro and his way of putting across the story of Pinocchio. And I like the way his nose grew, but it was like a branch when he lied and stuff. And he used it to his advantage at times in this film. I didn't like the look by the images going into it, thinking, oh, I don't know about this, but it totally worked on screen. And yeah, solid film. That is Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. Next up, we have Terrifier 2, along with The Batman and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This was my most anticipated film of the year. A 2 hour and 20-minute slasher film with Art the Clown. Give that to me, because Art the Clown is fucking awesome. And he proved that again in this movie. He is relentless here. He kills so many people in so many sadistic ways. And I just love David Howard Thornton in the role. He just pulls off all these mannerisms and stuff. You can tell he was a mime artist. And there's one scene in this where a kill scene, it goes on for like 5 minutes, but it feels like half an hour. You think he's stopped, and he just hasn't. It goes on and on, and Damien Leone pulled no punches here. It's all practical effects, and I respect him for that. 2 hours and 20 minutes was a bit of a slog for some people, but honestly, for me, it flew by. I remember having a toilet break at this film, and I thought it was like 20 minutes in. I paused the movie, I was an hour in. I couldn't believe it. It flew by. Lauren Lavera was great as the final girl here. Everything yeah, it was a solid sequel, and in my opinion, better than the first one. I can't wait for Terrifier 3. Bring that shit on. Next up, we have Uncharted, a film I was quite anticipating. I'm a big fan of the games, and this one totally worked for me. I thought Tom Holland in the role was really well done. Actually, a lot of people were saying he's never a Nathan Drake, but he plays a more younger Nathan Drake here, and I thought he was competent. Mark Wahlberg as Sully was a little bit of a different character, but again, worked for me. I liked them two on screen together. Solid adventure film with some moments are very unrealistic, like where he's hanging out the plane and stuff, but again, it happens in the game. And the end where some ships are getting lifted up and stuff like that. But overall, I had a fun time with this. It was a typical popcorn blockbuster and not the best video game adaptation, but we're going in the right direction here, I feel, and it could have been better, yes, I agree, but I still had a very fun and entertaining time with this. Next up is going to be a little bit of a controversial pick, because a lot of people really don't like this film, and that is Don't Worry, Darling. I did not see the problem with it. I think WandaVision getting there first did not help matters for this movie, and all the talk of bust-ups with the cast and stuff brought a lot of attention to it. But overall, I had a good time with this story. Basically, these characters living in the perfect neighborhood in the 50s, and something's not quite right, and Florence Pugh is sort of getting onto it, and she's sort of investigating what is really going on with this place they live. A lot of people saying Harry Styles is not a very good actor. I thought he was okay in this. I mean, I didn't see a bad performance in there or anything like that. And it was a very interesting film from Olivia Wilde, who also starred in this movie, and I thought she was a great actress, to be honest. Yes, it probably could have been a little bit better, but I dug it. I thought it was one of the more interesting films of the year, so that is Don't Worry, Darling. Okay, controversial pick of the time, because this is in a lot of people's top 10 movies of the year. And the fact that it's 25th out of 125 says that's a good movie to me. But I just did not love this film as much as everyone else. And that is Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Oh, this is very interesting. Really cool concept. Something I've never seen before. But it just didn't work for me as much as it did for everyone else. However, I had a great time with this film. Michelle Yeoh was so good in the lead role. Such a good performance. She was really funny at times. And what started to happen after about 40 minutes was amazing. However, I started to get my head hurt a little bit in the third act. It was a lot to take in. It was like not letting your brain pause for a minute, and I get that is the whole idea of the film, hence the title. But it just didn't quite work for me as much as everyone else. However, I did have a very good time with this, and I want to rewatch this movie again. I would go back to it, because maybe it might grow on me. I just don't think it's a 5-star film or anything like that, but it is a very, very solid and fun time. Next up, we have Bones and All, starring Timothée Chalamet and Taylor Russell, who are two cannibals who fall in love. And they sort of go on a road trip to meet Taylor Russell's mum, who she's searching for. And they meet some very sinister characters on the way. They go to a few cool locations, and that's what road trip movies are all about, isn't it? But the fact that they are cannibals just made it a little bit more interesting there. I thought they bounced off each other really well, some good chemistry. And it was a very interesting film. Some really cool moments as well, with someone's fingers getting bit off, and this old guy who is very, very strange and you don't quite know what he's about. Again, meeting the sinister characters along the way was my favourite part of this movie, but it was just very, very interesting. I had a great time with it. Next up, we have Prey, which is another entry into the Predator franchise, and this was just an absolutely awesome film, wasn't it? I don't think anyone expected it to be as good as it was. Amber Midthunder in the lead role is going up against the Predator, basically, and it's all set years ago. And I like the fact that the Predator wasn't as modernized as he was in the latest films, because it's all set hundreds of years ago, so they thought about that and gave him some older tools to work with to make it more of an even battlefield. So some really great action scenes in this, and there was a moment where the Predator's like lifting this cow up, and he's in camouflage. Is it a cow? I can't quite remember. And the animal is just bleeding all over his camouflage, and I thought, wow, that looks so sick, so amazing. I had a fun time with this. A Predator movie that does something totally different with the location change, and it totally worked. And you can basically just throw the Predator anywhere now, I believe, can't you? I think that's what most people want. People were coming up with different time zones and everything, time periods in history that they could go with. So yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing another one like this. Next up, we have Pearl. I got so excited for this film after loving X and seeing the trailer for this. And it wasn't as good as X, but it was a really, really solid movie. A prequel that totally goes with the other one and totally makes it both work. So this follows the old woman Pearl when she's like 18 or something during the time of World War One. She's living in this farmhouse and she wants to become a star. She will stop at nothing. That's her goal in life. And you can already tell that all the wires aren't connecting in her head. She's just a little bit off and she's got some evil within inside of her, really. And I loved the way this whole movie played out, how Mia Goth put the performance across to, as the movie went on, build into something more sinister. The monologue scene was great, but I loved the ending of this movie where she was just smiling for so long. Her cheeks must have been killing her. Mia Goth is awesome. She really is, and I thought she was incredible in this movie. Some really, really great moments involving an axe where she walks after someone, and that was so well filmed by Ty West. And we're getting another one called Maxine. I think that's been delayed to 2024 now, but I can't wait for that. X will be in this list very shortly. Next up, we have Where the Crawdad Sings. Now, this was one of the very few movies I went into totally blind. I thought I was going to see something else. Starring Ralph Fiennes and Jessica Chastain, The Forgiven. I don't know why I got that movie mixed up with this one, but I did. And I went in, and after 10 minutes, I realised it wasn't that film. But I had such a good time with this. Daisy Edgar Jones is this loner who has been accused of murder. And the whole town thinks she's done it because she lives out in the swamp on her own. And she's got connections to the guy who was murdered. And it's kind of a courtroom drama at the same time, but it also goes back to when she was younger and her life and how it's all come to be to this moment. And you don't quite know if she's innocent or not, but it all plays out to a very good climax. And you know what? I was so invested in this film from start to finish. I love films that are set in the deep south because you always get sinister characters and weird shit happens around them locations, and this film had a bit of that. And for me, it totally worked, and it was such a nice surprise. A great movie. Now, this next bunch of films are all 4-star and above, and we kick it off with Brian and Charles in 20th place. This was such a heartfelt movie. It's about this guy, Brian, who's an inventor, and he just invents the most worst inventions you could ever think of. And then one day he makes this android called Charles, and it actually comes to life and they become friends. And Charles kind of wants to go and see the world after a bit, but Brian is telling him that he can't, and there's a bit of conflict there, basically. But there's a little bit more to it with this family who live down the other end of the valley and in the countryside, and they kind of want to come and get Charles because they think he's great. And there's a lot of going on in the film, really. But the real core of it was Brian and Charles's friendship. And Charles was such a funny character. He really was. He made me laugh so many times, some of the stuff he says. But this is a really, really solid British movie. Next up, we have Bodies, 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 a murder mystery film that is very clever, going by the climax. But this is about a bunch of characters who are kind of annoying. They're meant to be. And some people will hate watching that, but it worked for me. I did actually like watching these annoying characters in this because I know what the film was trying to... It was trying to say that this is what millennials can be like. And I understand anyone who wouldn't like that. But for me, it worked. And these bodies are just piling up in this house one by one. And you don't quite know what's going on here, who's behind it and stuff. But the end of the film will explain everything. And it totally worked for me. I had a good time with Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. A24 have had a great year. and this is one of them reasons why they did. Next up we have Smile, a film that's a little bit like It Follows. You got Sosie Bacon in there in the main role, who sees this girl sort of kill herself, smile and kill herself in her office, and next minute she's seeing all this weird shit happen, and it's like this curse is following her around. I don't want to say too much if you haven't seen it, but basically she's got to get to the bottom of it. And there's some really creepy moments in here, some really really well done jump scares. Some of them do fall flat, but some of them are very effective. I jumped out my seat in the cinema, and I remember the woman next to me went, "You may be jumped there," because I don't like this double jump. My wife was laughing her ass off. Yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. It was definitely one of the best horrors of the year. Very interesting concept, and definitely one I recommend. And just for them people who have their smile on their face staring at Sosie Bacon in this, it creeps you the hell out. Next up we have Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, and this is Emma Thompson's character, who's a bit of a widow, and she hires this sex worker because she wants to get a little bit of fun and good sex in life, basically. And she befriends this guy and starts talking to him in the hotel room and stuff. And it's basically just them two for virtually 90% of the runtime, but it just totally works. Great acting in this, great backstories of both characters, learning more about them as they go. This was like a bit of a hidden gem of the year for me. I totally got into this movie from start to finish, and I kind of rooted for each of the characters as well. You kind of wanted to work out for both of them, because they seemed so sweet and had their own struggles going on in the background and trying to help each other overcome them as well. And I thought this was such a good movie. Next up we have Black Crab. I had this on my Letterboxd list for such a long time, and I thought that just looks like your typical Netflix action film. And I was sick of looking at the movie poster, and I just went, you know what, I'm just going to watch this now. And my God, I was blown away by how well filmed this movie was. Noomi Rapace is an actress I really like, from The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and she led this film very, very well. She has got to get this, I think it's this thing, this chemical that can stop the entire world war, or the world from ending, basically. She's got to get it from one side of the country to the other under enemy lines, and they've got to sort of get these skates on and go across the ice, because the whole plane is frozen, and it's never been this frozen before. And they encounter this dangerous mission where they've got to go out of enemy lines, basically, into enemy territory, but under the darkness, basically, so the enemy can't see them. They go into some very dangerous locations to get this item from one place to the other, and she's promised her daughter by the end of the movie and stuff, so it gives her more excuse to do this mission, basically. There was some really great shootout scenes in this film, some great action scenes, some really heartfelt moments. You got into the characters, you kind of started, getting invested in them, I thought. And I thought this was a very solid movie, a very bleak one, but that totally worked for what this movie was going for. Next up we have Cha Cha Real Smooth, directed by Cooper Raiff and starring Cooper Raiff, who I really thought was going to be such an annoying character, but after 10 minutes I started to warm to him, and he plays this guy who sort of makes people have fun at parties and gets the party going, and he strikes up a relationship with this woman whose daughter is at one of the parties, and he strikes up a good friendship with the daughter as well, and he kind of comes into their life a little bit, and it's just basically about them two and what could happen in future and the obstacles that's sort of in their way as well. It's a very, very hard movie to explain, basically, but it's just a really good, heartfelt drama, and you attach yourself to the whole story, to these characters, and you kind of really want it to work out, not just in the relationship sense, but for each character in their path in life, if you like. So I thought this was such a solid film, one that kind of surprised me as well, kind of like the last two I talked about there. So that is Cha Cha Real Smooth. Next up, we have another controversial pick. People are going to hate me for putting this 14th, but I can't lie, I had a good time with this movie, and that is Thor, Love and Thunder. Yes, I know people may say this is a bit of a joke of a film. The comedy is too heavy. I can probably agree, but that didn't stop me having a good time with it. I'm not one of the. I'm a Marvel. I like the MCU, but I'm not this hardcore fan who wants everything to be perfect. I can go in and have a good time with a comedic MCU film. Taika Waititi's humor is all over, rubber stamped everywhere, and Taika Waititi's humor works for me. I do think Christian Bale's character as the villain was a little bit wasted. He was probably the best part of the entire film. There is definitely problems with it, but I just went in and had a fun time, and it did work for me. I understand that this movie is not going to be for everyone because of a lot of aspects of it, but for me, I just went in and was entertained throughout. A lot of people think Thor is becoming a little bit of a joke. I can kind of agree with that, but the first two movies are very serious and everyone hates them two films. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people do dislike them films. So it's kind of like, which one do you want? Look, I'm not going to argue with anyone who doesn't like this movie. I get it. But for me, it worked. Next up, we have probably the most fun I've had at the cinema all year, and that is Jackass Forever. This was so fun to be in the movie with all the audience because a lot of people were like, oh, and then everyone was laughing, and it was like, oh, because the pain that's inflicted on people. This film just begs you to have fun with it. Just a typical Jackass film, but this guy in it, Poopies, is just getting everything done to him. And I felt so bad for him at the end. He's like the big victim of the movie, basically. Johnny Knoxville Taunton takes a little bit of a backseat in this, but he does absolutely do the most dangerous stunt in the entire film for sure. So respect to that guy. I just had a really fun time with the Jackass gang here. Some great stunts that they do and stuff. It was just a really, really fun movie. Next up, we have James Cameron's epic blockbuster, Avatar: The Way of Water. I went to see this in 3D. And it was one of the most visually stunning films I've ever seen on the big screen. Every piece of detail, you can see it from James Cameron. You can tell every blade of grass has been paid attention to. And it's no wonder he took so long to make this movie because it is literally visually perfect. The story for me felt a little bit like the first one, just very, very simplified. And it does feel like it sacrifices a little bit of the story for the visual impact. But the story isn't bad or anything. It's just a little bit simple, even though it's in a very convoluted and complex world, I feel like. The first hour was exceptional. The middle, a little bit of a lull. Third hour, exceptional again. So I do feel like this film was a little bit too long. You could feel the runtime, especially after like 2.5 hours. I was like, well, there's still a while to go here. But I wouldn't say I was bored at any point. It just did drag a little bit. Yeah, it's a very, very solid movie, though. It is. I mean, I kind of can't wait for the next Avatar now. And a bunch of new characters come into this one. And they totally work to me, especially the younger siblings. Yeah, it was nice to go from the forest location to like a water location as well. You know, it made it very interesting, but visually stunning film, and I'm glad I seen it at the cinema. And next up was a film that was in my top 10, was just shoved out by number 10 at the last minute, and it was one of the last films I seen of the year to shove it out, which I'll talk about in a minute. But this is The Menu. I had such a fun time with this one. Ralph Fiennes is a very sinister chef who invites all these people to a big menu that he's got planned for like these people who love food and stuff, and it sort of parodies the food industry and stuff. But with each menu that comes with each course, the film just gets more and more depraved and sinister, and you're like, wow, where is this film going? And Anya Taylor-Joy is sort of getting onto the fact that something isn't right, and you as the audience member go along with her to sort of investigate what's going on. And the film, as it just gets darker and darker, but with some comedic aspect thrown in there. I thought this was such an interesting time, something I've never quite seen before, and one of the best movies of the year. I mean, it's very unlucky to not make my top 10, but I had a great time with this one. And definitely recommend it. Just come to Disney Plus, so give it a go. Hey guys, not going to spend too long on these top 10 because I've gone into these in full detail on another video. So like I said, that is down below if you want to check it out. But 10th, we have Knives Out. Glass Onion, Knives Out mystery. Not as good as the first film, but definitely good enough to make my top 10. Great performances. Thought Daniel Craig was excellent in this movie. Next up, we have Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. The best MCU film of the year. Could have been cut probably 20 minutes, but I was never bored or anything. Very interesting story and a great tribute to Chadwick Boseman. Next up, we have The Banshees of Inisherin. Very, very like a film I've never seen before, basically, and it's just about this. Brendan Gleeson tells Colin Farrell he doesn't want to be friends with him no more, and it's wrecking Colin Farrell's head. He wants to know why, and he wants to get down to the bottom of it. All taking place in this very depressing looking location with about 50 people living in this village. Very interesting movie. Next up, we have X, my favourite horror film of the year from Ty West. All based in the 70s. You can tell it takes inspiration from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Great characters, and Kid Cudi was awesome in this, but Mia Goth is, again, the standout, just like Pearl. An excellent horror film. Okay, guys, the next bunch of movies all received 4.5, apart from my number one. These ones all received 4.5 stars. And first up, we have 13 Lives, which is a true story about a soccer team of kids in Thailand, was it? And they all get lost in this cave, and it's up to Colin Farrell and Viggo Mortensen, these British divers, to come over and get them out. And it's a really tense, edge of your seat movie, and you really, can't take your eyes off it. Really do recommend that one. Next up, we have All Quiet on the Western Front, one of the best war movies, if not the best war movie I have ever seen. All taking place in World War One. The German teenagers are duped into joining the war. They don't quite know what they're getting into, and it's a very, very impactful and heartfelt movie. Felix Camero is great as the lead, as Paul. Next up, we have The Northman, Robert Eggers' next film, which I didn't quite know what to make because The Lighthouse was a bit of a weird one for me. But this one totally works. Definitely more simplified for the viewer. Just an awesome revenge flick. Third, we have Top Gun Maverick, one of the most surprising films of the year. I do like the first Top Gun, but I didn't expect this one to be anywhere near the level it was. Absolutely excellent, well-made movie. No CGI involved or anything. Tom Cruise was just awesome getting in fighter jets. So well directed. I don't quite know how they done it, to be honest. And just a really, really good story at the core. Second, we have The Batman, which was first all the way until I watched another movie later in the year, which will be in a minute. I loved the direction Matt Reeves went in here. Can't wait for the sequel. What else needs to be said more about The Batman? I think we've all seen that one. But number one is RRR. This film reminded me why I love movies in the first place. It nudged me and said, this is why you love film, isn't it? This is why you fell in love with film. Every other scene was absolutely epic. Real great bromance in this story, and I loved every single second of this 3-hour runtime, and I didn't want it to end. An absolutely incredible film. A 10 out of 10 masterpiece. The only film I've given 5 stars to, and one that everyone should watch, and one of the greatest films I have ever seen. Okay guys, hope you all enjoyed this video. It's been a bit of a long one. I've done all this in one take. Can you believe it? My voice is getting a little bit hoarse here now, so I'm just going to leave it there. Let me know what you thought of my ranking. Let me know some of your favourite movies and surprising films down below. I'll try and reply to you all, I promise. Take it all easy, guys. I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.